Hi, everybody. I don't know, but maybe before I call it to order, I think all of our hearts are a little heavy today. And if we can just take just a moment and maybe just sort of center ourselves and just a moment of silence to sort of really think about and be thoughtful about what's happening right now. I mean, it's just been a heavy day. It's been a heavy week. As we go about lucky enough to do the work that we do, that we always take a moment and think about those so much less fortunate, and condolences to so many right now, particularly in Afghanistan. So just take a moment. Thanks, everybody. So, we'll do a quick roll call. Dan Miller.
I'm here,
Yeah.
Janet Miller.
Walter Cersei.
Right here.
We are here. We have four. So this is really good. So, I have our approval of the July 22nd, 2022 minutes. There's a motion. Is there a second? And I'm looking at you for any particular reason. Okay. And are there any discussions, any questions? Okay, thank you. So there are no comments, no questions. All those in favor say aye. Aye. The motion carries. Now is the time for public comments, and I'll just remind everyone that you have 3 minutes for your public comments, and I only have one public comment person signed up, and that is you, Mr. Bull. Hi, Mr. Bull.
It's good, thank you. It's good to be here. Good to be here. These are, I was remarking earlier, we're not bored. We're not bored. As y'all know, I live at 370 Wallace Road, think northern Antioch. Route 52 is the bus I take and branch off as convenient. I was at the North Nashville Police Precinct at the event in regard to the North Nashville Transit Center. A very impressive presentation, very well organized. The council members, Taylor and has certainly did some hard work, and council person Toombs was there, listening very closely, as he always does. There was a job fair going on at the main bus station when I was coming in, which means that people are hiring, which is always a very good thing. I also note that this happened right at I missed it, at the last board meeting. Wego has offered their main bus station facilities for COVID-19 shots as indicated to public health. Very nice gesture. I'm looking forward to the Wego Link first mile, last mile presentation that'll be happening in a few minutes here. That's something that's indicated. And I noticed there's a slight surplus in CARES Act funding, and I see there'll be an update, probably not now, but in the future. Appreciate what all of y'all do, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bull. Good to see you. Stay safe and stay healthy, okay? Are there any other public comments? I don't have any more cards, but does anyone have a comment? Hearing none, I will close the public comment section of our agenda right now, and I will turn this over to Mr. Cersei, our Chair of Operations and Finance.
No magic here, Mr. Oliphant, you are on.
Thank you, sir. On pages 7, 8, and 9, you have the year-end financials, preliminary financials. I did give you a background summary, but in addition to that, I thought, well, actually, let me say one thing. We did, as Mr. Bull mentioned, we did end up with a little bit of a surplus on the CARES Act funding, which we will be giving an update on that for the near future for how it affects future years. The only other thing that I really wanted to highlight was on page 9. I figured the board would wonder why in the world, at the about 2/3 of the way down, we would have borrowed $3 million. We have a lot of CARES Act money, and the reason for that is I wanted to wait until we got through year end to see what grant funding we were going to receive, as opposed to just haphazardly drawing on CARES funding and not being able to replace that back. So we did borrow. We are about to pay that back off next week, as a matter of fact, the $3 million. And the money that I talked about in the overview, in terms of the health expenses, we did draw the $1.5 million, and I was waiting for that and not doing that too early until we saw what other grant funding came in. So that's the reason that you saw a loan, but it has been repaid or will be repaid next week. One last thing I do want to give you the board a little more perspective on that I've talked about a little bit, and that is the recovery of the parking contract and the recovery of Dunkin' Donuts. I'm happy to say that Dunkin' Donuts is back to about 85% of their pre-COVID levels, which is really good. And it's and as far as Premier goes, I had a pretty in-depth conversation with them, talking nationally and locally, and it's kind of a surprising story. The transient parking within the 2-block radius of Lower Broad is back to pre-COVID levels. The area of issue that they're seeing nationally and here is monthly parking, as you might guess. I am pleased to say, well, a lot of our bread and butter comes from overflow parking from the UBS building parking garage, from hotels. When they start filling up, they make their employees move and park somewhere else, and they will actually lease spaces for them at our facility. And I'm happy to say they've been receiving a lot of inquiries to start back in September for additional spaces. And while me being the accountant, I think they're being a little optimistic, but they feel like they might be able to get it back to full contract by the end of the calendar year, which would be amazing. Right now, we're at about, our contract is about $93,000 a month, and we're receiving about $35,000 to $45,000 a month because we're splitting the revenues that they do get. So they're getting about $70,000 to $90,000 in rent that we get half of right now. So I just thought you would like that perspective in terms of recovery from another industry, so to speak. So.
I will say a lot of the large employers like Bank of America, Alliance Bernstein are pushing it return until January because of the variant. So this thing is impacting people's return to work.
Sure.
That's why I thought, and we did discuss that, but I thought he was being a little optimistic, but he was thinking based on the inquiries, but again, they might have changed their minds after they'd inquired too, so. Unless anybody has any questions, that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
No questions from me.
Are you all going to talk about the CARES Act, the leftover CARES Act funding?
In the very near future, I needed to wait until we got through the year end to know where exactly we would end.
We all see that leftover money. It's like, what's that about? So, thank you.
Mr. Burke.
All right, thank you. So if you open to page 10 through 14, this is the operations dashboard report. I did provide a summary of the events. One thing to note is this is our final month for the fiscal year. Some notes I kind of wanted to just share with you is during the month of June, our Nestor facility had some parking lot repairs. There were several potholes that were causing unnecessary damage to our buses that needed some attention. So we did end up doing some construction to fix those potholes, which did disrupt some of operations a bit. However, we had a good plan in place. I give a lot of kudos to the operations team. We moved about 40 to 50 buses to our Myatt facility to kind of continue operations. So there was, and this was for a period of about 3 weeks, caused some additional deadhead and some logistics of shuttling operators to and from their respective pullout areas. So again, big kudos to the operations team for ensuring services didn't see major impacts during that time. I also want to mention that June, we saw a lot of detours kind of develop as they started preparing for the July 4th events. And we are also going to see that in July as well. There was a lot of detours for like the Grand Prix and the other various events. One thing I want to note in this report is ridership it is increasing compared to last year. We noticed that access is coming back a little bit quicker than bus. We noticed an 18% increase in our bus from previous year, but nearly a 30% increase from access from previous year. And just to note, from pre-COVID numbers, access, we're performing about 70% of what we were doing back in pre-COVID times, and about 57% on our fixed bus. So we are seeing the ridership starting to come back, but it's something to note as we kind of look at that. And a lot of the things, and we can kind of continue to talk about where the ridership's coming back. We're seeing it a lot on weekdays, weeknights, and weekends. So that's some things that we're kind of looking at as we kind of look at our planning for the future on how we want to handle our schedules and our needs for our riders. On-time performance and trip completion continue to remain strong as we kind of ramp up for fall services and schools going into session. We do expect, some traffic congestion, some of those KPIs to kind of see some impacts, but we're monitoring that as we kind of continue along.
So with the kids back to school, I hate to interrupt you,
Sure.
but what are you seeing right now? I mean, I suppose it went up, and now is it coming back down again?
Are you, in return to the completed trips and on-time
Yeah,
performance? I would say we're kind of just monitoring that. We're seeing more traffic these days, as schools are going back into session and stuff.
But is your ridership with the students, how's that?
The ridership with students
Strong?
and it's improved.
We're running about 1,700, 1,800 a day.
Okay.
Which is under half of what pre-everything is.
Okay.
So it varies by.
Pre-everything.
Pre-everything. Pre-COVID-19, pre-variant, and so I think now in variant, it might shift again.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, with this variant, where, we started thinking we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and now this variant's coming along. And so we're going to be keeping a close eye on how things are kind of progressing. Some employers are starting to shift their work from home policies. So we'll keep you guys.
Still in flux.
Yeah, keep you posted as
Okay.
last thing I have to note is just our miles between road calls. It did dip a little bit this month. However, nothing. Did I lose you guys? Last thing I want to say is the miles between road calls dipped a bit this month. However, still in a healthy ratio. Nothing too concerning, but we are keeping an eye on that as we kind of work towards getting our buses ready for October service and future services as we go. So if there's no questions, that will conclude my report.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Feuerberg, please edify us further.
Sure, I get this on. There we go. All right, good afternoon. So we are looking at the quarterly route performance report starting on page 15, and we did have a little quick write-up there. Hope you all had a chance to review, but I'll hit a couple of the highlights here, and then if there are any questions, happy to answer them. So we're comparing the last 3 months, so April, May, and June of the fiscal year to the previous fiscal year, which means that we're actually looking at the first 3 months of the pandemic for the year-over-year comparison. So you can kind of see where we are now compared to where we were then. So obviously the variants hadn't quite made as much of an impact during this time period, but we certainly saw a fairly robust recovery compared to at least the lows that we experienced then, with overall ridership up about just over 25%. And of course, we'll have to track that in the future, but at least looking at recent trends and with some of the school students returning, it looks like we're at least holding steady there and not kind of falling back down. But what's more interesting is that ridership is returning at different rates across the system. So we've got our frequent transit network, which saw lower overall declines in terms of in a percentage basis when we first entered into the pandemic. But we've also seen quicker recoveries in terms of ridership. And we've been very, deliberate in making sure that we maintain service frequency and reliability on those major corridors because they do constitute the vast majority of the ridership in our system. So there's the greatest impact to customers there.
And why do you think that is? That it's not universal numbers, but just certain routes?
So I think on those certain routes, one of the things that these routes do very well is they serve an all-day network of riders with varying commute and work patterns. And what we've seen, not just in terms of route by route, but even looking at time of day across the entire network, is that those commute-oriented both services in terms of routes, but also just times of day have seen much more significant declines, which is, it makes sense for, there's certain professions that lend themselves to remote work and others that don't so much. So the more service industry oriented markets that we're able to serve with an all-day frequent transit network have, they've had to continue to go to work in person. But the frequency enhancements that we've made and some of those routes that we have on our frequent network are actually operating at greater frequencies now than they were pre-pandemic, also helps to attract and retain riders because it's not as much of an issue if you miss this bus, the next one's coming in, 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
We also see that our on-time performance has continued to remain strong. So we had a round of schedule adjustments in April where additional running times were put in by our scheduling department to account for anticipated increases in traffic, which we've certainly seen. So that's allowed us to keep our on-time performance at pretty much historic highs since we started tracking with GPS. I'll be honest, I don't think we're going to be able to maintain 91% coming into the fall, but we will have another round of service adjustments as we're going back towards essentially full service levels in early October, and additional changes will be made to travel times then to try to mitigate that to the extent possible. But anybody who's been out in Nashville now on the bus or in their car, just walking on the sidewalk and see, the traffic's making a return. It's still not quite where it was. It might feel like it, but it's getting there. We also have a number of special events returning, and Andy mentioned that in his report with the 4th of July. Some of them are starting to look like they may be put on hold again, especially some of the larger conventions, but we anticipate that to also have an impact on-time performance overall. So again, the key takeaway here, aside from the on-time performance, really is we're trying to, with the service changes that we enact, looking at these trends closely, better align our network to what we're seeing today in terms of those ridership profiles. So that means additional frequent service all day, not just during the peaks, and also additional evening and weekend service. So one of the big changes with the fall changes will be an addition in service span to accommodate more variety of working shifts that people may have, which is something that has been in our Better Bus plan and been a request of customers for quite some time, but we're taking the opportunity here and seeing what our ridership patterns are to make those changes for the better. So with that, are there any questions?
I do have one question. I don't know, maybe you can answer it or even Andy can answer it. Now that there's so much conversation going on in the city about these entertainment vehicles, how much are they impacting our on-time performance and our inability to get out of downtown? Or now I understand they're moving further on West End and also past the Gulch into the 12th South area. So I just wonder, how much is that a problem, and at what point can we help with
Careful,
any
Danny.
kind
Yeah, I know.
with any kind of no, I just wonder if it has an impact, how are we telling our story about the impact of the vehicles?
Yeah, it certainly does have an impact. I couldn't tell you, I couldn't say, oh yeah, it's a 0.5%, impact on-time performance on this particular route, but it does. It contributes to slower travel speeds and again, that unpredictability, because there's not always a slow moving vehicle, in front of the Route 5, but when there is, it significantly impacts performance there. That and honestly, we've seen with the return of Lower Broad, which is again great for the city overall in terms of economic activity, but we've seen significant impacts especially going through the core of downtown, say, for example, on 4th Avenue, just with pedestrian activity and difficulty navigating those intersections. I think that's something that those kinds of vehicles and also just the general transit and pedestrian and private vehicle passenger flow will be something to be looking at in the upcoming downtown traffic study.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, Steve and I talked about it last week, and I just think there's a point where crossing Broadway's just got to be impossible.
Yes.
So
We've
it's not going
actually,
to change, so what can we do to flex to keep
Absolutely.
that from happening?
Yeah,
right?
and congratulations, that was a very adept way of addressing that
Beautifully.
issue.
I said true, didn't I?
But I was talking to our other Freud Burke, who tracks this stuff very closely the other day. And on some Saturday nights, it's taken us a half an hour to get through downtown. And I wouldn't attribute that specifically to pedal taverns or those vehicles, but to Dan's point, it's just that overall level of congestion
Crowds and-
in the core. The other thing is due to the closure of 2nd Avenue, we've been rerouting some of our major routes, Murfreesboro and Nolensville, kind of around on Rosa Parks and 8th, staying out of it. And talking to Katie the other day, it's so far, even though it's a much longer, it's not as direct as coming direct up 2nd, it's really only taken us about 2 or 3 minutes longer than otherwise. So definitely some things, I think Dan hit it extremely well. We've got to look at our current and our pandemic experiences and say, what do we kind of try to learn and adapt from moving into the future, even when things get hopefully more normal.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other queries? Use free, son.
Thank you, sir. Make room for Rob.
All right. And we have another woke presenter, Brother Ralph.
Good afternoon. I haven't been up here in a while.
I know, it's other than to fix our mics and keep us straight. And we
Get everything
appreciate
set
that you
up,
always keep
exactly.
us straight that way. Thank you.
That's right. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our video security system this afternoon. The home, our Wego Central is home to our video operations center. And we have about 200 cameras that we're currently using. They're used at Wego Central, the Nestor Garage, and also the Maya Garage. While the system is primarily used by our security team, it's used as a tool for real-time monitoring and documenting video documentation. It supports customer safety, crime prevention, and incident investigations. It also is utilized by safety, operations, and maintenance department as an investigation tool for incidents for customer complaints, slips and falls, and vehicle accidents. On occasion, the system has assisted Metro Police for crime investigations as we continue our ongoing partnership with them. Over the last 4 years, we've upgraded the central software for the security to an enterprise video security system, improving camera positions by adding additional cameras and also positioning cameras to cover blind spots. Future improvements for system coverage will be at the Wego Central Parking Garage. We're going to add we'd like to add cameras up there. Implement coverage at the Hillsborough Transit Center, and eventually at the North Nashville Transit Center. With these expansions and ongoing maintenance, we have a need to increase our contract with our current vendor, Eye in the Sky. Do you have any questions or any questions that I can answer? We have Mike Moore, our security manager, sitting in the back, so.
We might have to have a special session with our security people.
All right. Our request to the board is to approve an increase of $72,000 to our current contract, with a not to exceed contract value of $367,812 to our video surveillance system through August 22. Over the next year, we'll be evaluating the future years with that current vendor.
I just think it's so important. I mean, it's so important for all the reasons that you said, so I say yes.
Especially now,
Well,
I don't have any
I
questions.
guess I have to reluctantly go along.
Oh, thank you, appreciate it.
We haven't had any, but on a serious note, have we had any complaints from employees regarding the use of these cameras?
I don't believe so. I don't know of any complaints.
Okay,
I think, safety is the most important thing, and
sure.
if riders feel like they're safe coming into our facilities and employees the same way, I think it just benefits us, all of us.
It's just as we proliferate our society with, these cameras, it does raise some queries.
Yes.
In the name of safety, yes, but, where's the line on that? But yeah, I hear you. Well, we've heard your recommendation, and would like to submit your recommendation to the board for approval.
Okay, that is, so we need a motion, though, because we didn't have a committee meeting. You're proud of me, Margaret?
I do move.
So there is a motion.
Second.
And there's
Thank
a
you.
second. Any comments, questions, any further conversation? There being none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion passes. We have a new video to be used appropriately and for safety, correct, Mr. Cersey?
We'll see.
Okay.
Yes, I forgot. Just again, direct your attention to the list of upcoming procurement opportunities, and we have a raft of them, actually. Real estate services, request for qualifications for construction administration consulting services, ITB on the Clarksville Pike and 26th Avenue building demolition, ITB on the Clarksville Pike, removal of underground storage tanks and hydraulic lifts from the old service station that was once there. Escalator modernization. There's probably going to be a limited number of contractors available for that. Probably one of them named Otis. The administration vehicles, vans, bus tires. That sounds fairly innocuous, but that's a hefty sum involved, $300,000 to $600,000 per annum. And then, of course, we have another elevator and escalator preventive maintenance contract. I would hope that some of these providers that are unlikely to be minorities, in fact, are encouraged to develop minority apprenticeships and training programs so that doesn't remain a constant circumstance. Ms. Roberts, I send that message to you. Yes. All right. All right, I believe that concludes the work of the Operations and Finance Committee, and I now pass the torch back to the chair.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cersey. That was a good report today. And so now I get to turn to our co-chair and
Our nice
be
committee.
nice with our nice
All right, I
committee.
will be nice today. Hi, everybody. Dan is back with us. Dan is now the Deputy Chief Operating Officer for
Oh,
MTA,
yeah.
so that's exciting. So yay you.
Good job.
And,
Congratulations.
And we are going to talk about the Wego Link First Last Mile pilot project. So Dan, I'll hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, and I apologize, might ask you to turn around here. We've got a few slides. I know it's a little bit awkward with this,
Right.
with this setup, but yes, I'm going to be giving a status update on the Wego Link project, which is actually currently ongoing in terms of beta testing in the Antioch area. So just as a quick background, this is the service area where we have the current program set up. Customers can ride anywhere within this service area, but their trip needs to start or end at one of the two transfer locations that are on the slide here, which are Nashville Village and Bell Road. So this is truly designed to be a first and last mile connection service to the fixed route service that we operate in this area, which in this case is the number 55 Murfreesboro. And as of the most recent service change, is running every 10 minutes during weekdays, so it makes that connection quite a bit easier. The fare is subsidized to make the service a little bit more affordable for customers because they're taking this trip on Uber or on one of our paratransit service partners. So we do subsidize the cost of the trip so that the customer generally pays about $2 for most of the trips that would occur in the area. And Wego will cover up to another $8. So if the trip total is $10 normally, the customer would just pay $2. But customers are still responsible for the fares once they board the vehicle on the bus. A couple of shots of the transfer locations here. So these are at Nashville Station outbound and inbound. All of these transfer locations are ADA accessible, and they also include covered shelters. And they also have real-time next bus arrival information. So even customers that maybe don't have smartphones know when they're connecting buses to arrive. And this is just a couple of pictures of the Bell Road stations. Now, while the stops themselves are accessible, they are in travel lanes on Murfreesboro Road, which is a busy road. And so for safety reasons, Uber vehicles and other smaller vehicles can't stop safely right at the bus stop. The bus stops are also only big enough to really accommodate one bus right now. So Uber is working with us, and we've identified safe areas that are off street for them to pick up and drop off nearby, and we can communicate that information to riders through their smartphone application to help guide both the riders and the drivers to those pickup and drop off locations. Now, if this pilot service that we're currently in beta with now, and pretty soon we'll be launching into a public pilot, if that service becomes more permanent, then we'd also start looking at other opportunities for example, infrastructure improvements in that area to be able to make that even more of a seamless connection and have the pickups and drop-offs occur closer to each other. So in the last few months, focus has really been on developing customer-facing materials and on beta testing the program itself to make sure things are working as intended. So we have designs completed now for different materials, including a website. And the website has an interactive map that helps customers identify where I'll show an example in just a minute, but where they can pick up and drop off and be within the eligible service area. And we've also, in addition to just having unstructured testing with customers and volunteers from the public, we've partnered with a local nonprofit to also help put the system through its paces. So this is a quick shot of the interactive program map that we have, and this is embedded into the website. Customers can either type in an address or click on the map and figure out if they're within the service area or not. Since the service area doesn't exactly follow with, for example, a particular road or something like that, it's designed around neighborhoods that are generally connected to this area. So this helps for people to know if they can ride the service. We've also, I did want to note that this was actually developed entirely in-house by Hannah Schaefer in our planning department. So it's a pretty cool tool. She can do all kinds of magic with GIS tools. So we think this will be really helpful, and we'll be able to kind of expand this type of a model if we deploy to additional service areas in the future. So overall, the beta testing feedback we've received has been fairly positive. Most of the feedback that we've received that's been more structured has been from our volunteers at the Nonprofit Network for Sustainable Solutions. Small organization has been helping us really, and really providing valuable feedback for how we can just improve the customer experience a little bit. So we'll talk about some of those improvements that we're making in just a minute. I did want to just provide a quick overview of what the typical beta test trip looks like. This gives an overview of just distance and duration and cost. And the one thing I'd like to highlight here is that cost per trip to Wego of about $6.35 is actually just a little bit higher than what our pre-COVID net cost per passenger was on fixed route, which for a demand response service where you're actually, going to someone's door is encouraging, because these are generally, lower productivity services. And we do have that as a goal within the overall project to be within, say, 150% of what our fixed route net cost per passenger is. So some of the next steps that we're taking to follow up on some of the feedback that we received, and actually, I should note, this says what we are doing, but we actually, since we put these slides together, have finished these items. So we've designated those pickup and drop-off locations in the Uber app that are off-street so that customers know and drivers know where to go. And we've also been working with our paratransit provider, Mobility Solutions, to make sure that they have vehicle availability to meet the need for both wheelchair accessible and cash-based customer payment strips for this service. And I'm happy to say, after some testing that we did last week, I feel much more confident that they have their process in place and will be able to meet customer requests in a timely manner for this service. So we've already done some of that additional follow-up testing, and we're working on setting a formal go-live date. But we think it makes sense. We're targeting trying to coordinate the launch of this around the fall service changes, just to be able to have a more ease of communication to customers, and we'll be able to roll this change in with all the other fixed route service changes that we have upcoming. Looking ahead, we'll of course keep a close eye on performance as the pilot unfolds. We have some key performance indicators that we're going to be tracking closely. For example, total trips taken, trip costs is an important one, both what the customer is paying and what Wego is paying. We'll also be looking at things like customer satisfaction. We're going to try to do some survey type engagement activities with customers to understand kind of, what their experience with the service has been. I also mentioned we'll be looking at the potential for future site improvements. Certainly if this becomes a permanent service offering, that'll be important, both here and in other potential areas. Even if, if we're looking at, for example, a full-fledged transit center type facility, for example, in North Nashville, we can dedicate some spacing, but even at these types of locations, we'd like to be able to improve the customer experience through additional accommodations there. And of course, we'll be coordinating this pilot with additional activities that we have on the access improvement study that has just kicked off this month, in terms of how this service can be better coordinated with our existing paratransit operations. So that's where we are with the project right now. Things are moving along. Hope to have a public launch in the next couple of months, and happy to answer any questions about where we are and where we're going.
So when you say public launch, are we looking at going system-wide, or, is that the plan?
So for the public launch, it would still be just in the Antioch area.
Okay. In that zone?
In that service zone that we saw earlier, yeah. And, but it would be available to the public at that point,
yeah.
And we'd have, public, obviously, this is public material, people know it's coming, but we'd actually put out information at the bus stops, put things on our website to let people know, hey, this is here and we want you to use it, as opposed to just testing right now.
And then how long will that pilot phase go?
The initial pilot period would be for 6 months, and then we have built in some buffer in terms of our contracts with the service providers so that we can continue to operate the pilot while we go through that final evaluation of that 6-month period.
I think it just sounds great. It'll be fascinating to see what the demand is and then what the true consumer feedback is. But I think it's brilliant.
And it sounds like it's going pretty smoothly.
Yeah, we've definitely got a couple areas of improvement, but we've been able to make those adjustments.
The big distinction between beta and going public is when you sign up for beta, we have the expectation that you'll share information with us. So once it goes public, it's pretty much, you can use it, and obviously you can share information with us or not, and.
Imagine if they're not happy that they will.
Yeah, we get that. We get that. But I know Dan and our customer care group have been very proactive in reaching out to the folks who are using it, including Network for Sustainable Solutions, to get that feedback.
Other questions? Walter,
Yes.
Gail? Yeah.
Yes. What assurances have you received from our access mobility people that vans that can transport wheelchairs will actually be available to the demand?
So they've, of course, provided us their commitment, and we've executed a contract amendment with them, specifically with regards to this service. And it's something that we'll, of course, be monitoring closely to make sure that that commitment is realized. And if, for whatever reason there are any difficulties, we also have backup options available of dispatching our own paratransit vehicles. But we would like to be able to work with our providers, and we think that they're in a very good position to be able to deliver. We're working with one provider right now to keep that close relationship, and they're definitely all of our providers have been performing fairly well. All have their own minor issues, but this has been our most reliable provider and most consistent in terms of delivering service, and we're confident in their abilities. But it's something that we'll be watching very closely.
And then, of course, the B side of this disc is if they're going to concentrate their fleets in one geographic locale, what happens to the rest of the city demand?
Yeah, and so we definitely want to make sure that our overall paratransit service doesn't suffer at the expense of, one particular specialized zone. We also, fortunately with this particular service provider in this particular area, and it won't be the case for every market that we look at this type of a service model for, but they actually have their dispatch location very close to this facility as well. So that gives them some additional flexibility in terms of having vehicles available.
Keep your eye on this one.
Yes, sir.
Please.
The thing I'd add, Walter, is that even nationally, we're in cities, and Dallas, Texas is a good example. It has a very mature program. Frankly, if this thing is tremendously successful, it will be a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction, like under 1% of overall ridership. And the overwhelming majority of users are going to be like pure Uber users, who are used to the app. So we've got mobility solutions in place to deal with, folks who don't have credit cards, folks who don't have smartphones, folks who have mobility limitations. But, again, the thing I would continue to highlight from the 6 or 7 cities we've talked to have been doing this for 4 or 5 years is, number one, it's a very small percentage. It's an important percentage because it's a tough area of the city for us to serve with traditional transit. Things are very spread out. There's no sidewalks. So it's a really important service, but it tends to be a niche. And I would suspect as a percentage, say, of overall access trips, it's going to be a very small, piece. It's going to be important for connections to specific locations. And again, one of the other advantages is if we start to see trip patterns that suggest a higher level of density of trips, then we can kind of move in with other service models that make more sense.
Great question. That's interesting, Walter. When I was reading through the package ahead of time, that was my question, was what percentage of it is going to be our access customers? So other questions, comments?
None for me.
Good work. Good report, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go make it work.
We'll make it work. That's it.
Without taking anything away from anybody else, right?
No,
That's
that's
right.
right. So, great. Okay, I believe that is the only item that the New Initiatives Committee has. So I'll hand it back to you, Madam Chair.
Well, thank you, Janet. I appreciate it. Steve, your report, CEO report.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Unfortunately, if you were delighted by the relatively short agenda, I always tend to make my reports longer on days. I do have a few items to report, but I know Janet has a later, you will definitely be on time for your
Thank you.
commitment.
It's 4:30. I got time. I'm good.
First of all, I want to thank all of our members, and the 3 here, and also Jessica and Mary, as well as Margaret, for the time that you spent with Doug Eady, our board governance consultant. Doug's advancing design of our board governance fine-tuning workshop. Gail and Margaret and Janet and I had the opportunity to meet with him a week or so ago to sort of advance that agenda. He's reworking some things based on those conversations, and we should expect to see something back from him in the next week or two. I know we kind of struck out on our first prospecting for a date. Frankly, not altogether surprising with this group and looking for a full day. So Doug and Monica and I are going to work on, probably by tomorrow, we should get you out another polling, kind of moving a little bit further out. So look to that and appreciate everybody's, one of the quickest polling things I've ever seen responded to. So appreciate everybody responding quickly. You heard Dan and Andy both allude to our fall service changes that will go into effect on October 3rd. It will restore our service levels to their pre-pandemic level, although not in all the same places. I think Dan, Katie, folks in our planning department, operations have done a really good job kind of looking at those changing patterns and redeploying services, you know, where frankly they make more sense. So the real noteworthy, a bunch of little changes, a couple little routing changes, but the real noteworthy thing is kind of extending that service day out later into the evening. So we're really anxious for that, something our customers have been asking for years and years and years. I don't want to put it as all the rosy picture. We reported to you previously on our shortage of operators in particular, staffing in general, but operators in particular. Obviously, people having a tough time hiring right now is kind of a worldwide phenomenon. And I talk to my peers in the industry all the time, and for most transit agencies, it's their number one issue. So we are keeping an eye on that. We're probably about 25 operators short of where we need to be for October. That amounts to about 6%, so it's probably not crippling, I would say, and I think Andy agrees with me. Our bigger concern is for moving forward into the March service changes, where we would be looking at an additional 7% expansion in service hours. But I know Rita and Andy are all over it, right? And and you will be getting more detailed reporting on their initiatives in the coming months. I saw earlier, I think I still see Patrick Green from ATU Local 1235. I want to welcome Patrick to the meeting. I also want to thank him for helping to put one tool in the toolbox. Recently, DTO and ATU Local 1235 completed negotiation of a new collective bargaining agreement. Has a bunch of good stuff in it. And that, if I'm not incorrect, Patrick, has been ratified by the membership? Has been ratified by the membership, and I know by the DTO board. One of the tools in the toolbox and one of the challenges we've had was frankly a too low starting wage here in Nashville with a changing market. So through that agreement, we've been able to take the starting wage up from $17.56 an hour to $22 an hour, and also shorten the period to get to top rate.
That's great.
So hopefully, you heard Mr. Bull refer to the job fair that's going on as we speak out at Central. Hopefully we'll be getting some more candidates through that process. I want to thank particularly Patrick and also Bill Miller, our recently retired Chief Operating Officer, who led the negotiations for both sides on getting us to a productive and really not that late agreement. So I was certainly very pleased with it. Wouldn't be a meeting at this time and in this place without us mentioning COVID. With respect to COVID status, obviously we're all very concerned about this Delta variant and the impacts. We've, under the leadership of Nick Oldham, our Senior Safety Manager, we reinstated our biweekly all-call with respect to COVID status. Nick stays in constant touch with Metro Nashville Public Health Department on the latest thinking. Transportation Security Administration has extended the mask mandate on all public transportation, including our vehicles, through sometime about January 18th. As of today, we have 5 employees off for COVID exposure, either an exposure or testing positive. So, and with respect to ridership, as Dan and Andy both reported, we're seeing a slow, steady return. Slow and steady is okay with me, as folks tend to come back. And in reference to Gail's question, Andy was kind of a setup. I was just curious myself on the school ridership, and Katie and Rick Gomez reported right now we're carrying between 1,700 and 1,800 MNPS students a day. Prior months, and we've heard talk during Dan's report about the downtown scene, transportainment, scooters, transit, valet lanes, beer trucks, you name it, it happens downtown. We are collaborating with the city of Nashville to conduct a downtown traffic study that goes beyond our system, goes into things like curbside management, parking management, those very same valet lanes, what have you. The city asked us to coordinate the solicitation of proposals in the procurement process. Those proposals came in yesterday. And as one of the evaluators with Felix Castrodad and Faye DeMassimo and Marty Sewell from NDOT are also going to be evaluating. I was super pleased we only got two, but we got two really good ones. Stan Tech and Nelson Nygaard who have done extensive work around the country on these issues, have proposed. So we're looking forward to that process. You've heard reference to our transit centers. Construction continues on the Hillsborough Transit Center. Back and forth, our contractor, remember we are sharing contractors with the school district, so they're doing finish up work on the school while they conduct our work. It is coming out of the ground, so if you drive down past that area, you can actually start to see what it's going to look like. And we do expect the facility to be substantially complete this calendar year. Last month, we shared with you some of the early renderings we have on North Nashville Transit Center. Again, Mr. Bull reported, and appreciate John's attendance at the session we had that was hosted by Councilman Taylor at the North Nashville precinct this past Saturday. Councilmember Toombs was also there, as well as State Representative Harold Love, who's been a big advocate of this project. I will remind people it's kind of rare in that our single largest funding source for this project is state funding under the IMPROVE Act, which Representative Love remembered and was quick to highlight to the assembled audiences. We've got a number of other forums scheduled, both virtual and in person, and one of those will be this coming Saturday at the same location, the North Precinct, with the Bordeaux Hills Neighborhood Association. Many of you may remember a leader in that organization, Ms. Ruby Baker, was very actively involved in our in-motion activities and other transit planning. So that's moving along. In addition, we invited several dozen neighborhood and community leaders to participate in kind of an advisory panel, particularly to help us advance some of the cultural, public art, historical programming on the site, which our esteemed chair, Ms. Carr Williams, agreed to chair. We've heard back so far, 13 have accepted our invitation, a very broad and diverse group, religious leaders, business leaders, social service leaders, elected officials. So we're very anxious to get that up and going. So that project continues at a very slick pace. In addition to those two centers which are in very active project development, we've had some early conversations with the developers at the Madison Town Center project up on Gallatin Pike, which is a really huge site, a unique long-term development opportunity. That won't be a quick project. And my public thanks to Councilwoman Nancy Van Rees, who pulled us into that project, and that's moving along. And we're also talking to the developers who are working on the Global Crossings, the Global Mall redevelopment project down at Antioch, and they're very interested in accommodating a transit center in that facility, which would be noteworthy because it is the terminal station for our Murfreesboro Pike number 55 service, significant boarding location for us. But if we're ultimately able, as per the city's transportation plan, to advance a bus rapid transit concept, it would actually be a terminal station on that line. I will say, not unrelated to our conversation about transit centers, we've had a lot of discussion with the Housing Equity Fund folks at Amazon. You may remember a couple months ago, they announced the formation of their Housing Equity Fund in their 3 target investment cities, Washington, D.C., Seattle, and Nashville, to try to pump money in through both grants and below market rate interest loans to both sustain current affordable housing in communities and also enhance the stock of available affordable and workforce housing. They've been very forward in saying their target is around transit service, and not just in cities like DC and Seattle that have very mature rail fixed guideway systems, but they've made it clear to the development community they will prioritize their investments along Wego bus routes that have high levels of service, so our frequent transit network routes. And that has sort of rejiggered a lot of the conversation about transit centers and how might we partner with some of those housing developments around centers. Earlier this week, Rta and Trey and I had the opportunity to accompany. They brought their Housing Equity Fund staff into Nashville, for many of them who were from Seattle and DC. First time in the city, and we had a chance to take a tour on a bus. We took a look at the North Nashville project. We took a look at the Dickerson Pike corridor. So I think that will be a relationship that we'll be talking about for some time to come. You may recall several months ago, you authorized a contract with the HDR Engineering, changing gears here now. We're off of housing and transit centers. But speaking of complicated construction, several months ago, you authorized a contract with HDR Engineers for us to take a hard look at the Nestor facility, do kind of an options analysis. In the last couple of weeks, HDR conducted a several-hour workshop with our operating facilities, engineering planning staff to look at potential options. So we're narrowing down the options to be looked at. Primarily, those include what can we do to make it a modern, workable, long-term facility on the Nestor site, given all the limitations and all the conditions we have, and then what options might exist if we decide that that is just not going to be in our long-term interest. So you stay tuned. That will be a significant chunk of the board's policy portfolio coming up over the next year or so. Several months ago, we reported the success that the city, now NDOT, had in acquiring some really competitive funds through the Federal Highway Administration under their Advanced Transportation and Congestion Management Technologies Deployment Program, focused in the Charlotte corridor. Certainly, there'll be a major upgrade in transit or traffic signal technology, traffic management technology, incorporating some of the stuff we've seen before with transit priority, similar to what we've done on Murfreesboro Road, fiber communications, but also it's appropriate, Dan's still sitting here because he's our point person on this. And frankly, when these conversations, when they invite me to attend these meetings, I don't understand most of what they're talking about. But one of the other initiatives or one of the other innovations we're looking at in Charlotte is actually headway-based management. So the idea of not worrying as much about whether the bus is on schedule, but in some of our higher frequency corridors, particularly where you have very irregular traffic flow, that how do we in real time just keep buses spaced the right distance apart? When you're operating, as Dan alluded to, we're getting some of our corridors to every 10 minutes. When you operate every 10 minutes and you consider a trip on time when it's -1 to +5 late, on time doesn't really matter that much. You can be really good on time with buses being too close together and too far apart. So trying to evolve that, that work. Janet alluded to earlier, we had a couple of promotions. Dan into the Deputy COO role, where he will support Andy and the entire group, not only over the projects you've heard about, Wego Link, the Charlotte Corridor project, our fare collection project, but really working with folks like Carolyn Riggs-Farrar in transportation, Cynthia Whitehead, who oversees our street operations, Carl Rokos in vehicle maintenance, to apply a lot of the systems, technology, and analytical techniques to kind of those broader issues of vehicle availability, fleet performance, workforce availability, operation of our radio control center, what have you. So we're anxious to have a very, very strong operation, very hard-working operations department, even become smarter, which is really intriguing. Finally, I'll close with a few of the RTA side issues. You heard Rob speak earlier about our video surveillance monitoring as part of our management contract with RTA. That'll be a very interesting piece for them, because in addition to the additions that Rob talked about with Hillsborough, North Nashville, and the Wego Central Parking Garage, we have program funds on the RTA side to do, sorry, Walter, video surveillance at our RTA park and ride lots, which unfortunately several months ago, especially with the lower traffic we have had some incidents of vandalism at some of the outlying lots. So it's definitely an important upgrade that we'll be working on with them. On their dime, not on the MTA's dime, Madam Chair. So very important in that respect. We also on the RTA side, Transit Now Nashville. I think many of you are familiar and have attended Transit Now events in the past. They did their first in-person event since the onset of the pandemic. Last Friday, it was a ride-along on the Star to Donaldson Station, where we all gathered at Fat Bites for snacks, beverages, and conversation. Very well attended. There were probably 40 or so folks there, including 3 out of our 4 Metro Council members whose districts are along the Star Corridor. So lots of good conversation about that. At the risk of having you think that all the RTA does is the Star, we are awaiting the delivery of 10 new commuter buses for our RTA regional commuter routes. 7 of those buses will be assigned to the MTA operation that serves Rutherford County. So those are those big over-the-road coaches. And then finally, I want to let you know, because we're all optimistic about this upcoming season, we have renewed our partnership with the Titans to run the Titans Express on the Wego Star for all 9 home games this season. So if you live in the eastern part of the county or live out in Wilson County, this is really more directed to anybody who might be watching. But hey, you all live on West End or Edge Hill Village, might decide to drive out to Donaldson Station and catch a train in for the game. So usually it's a very well-ridden train, especially well-ridden when the Titans are doing well. So we wish them luck this season. So unless there are any questions, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
I have a question. What's the RTA ridership looking like? How much has it bounced back?
Not much, unfortunately. According, as per the trends that Dan is reporting, because the RTA service is very heavily skewed toward that downtown office commuter, we are still down probably in the 75 to 80% range. So RTA is scheduled also to go back to full service in October. So we'll see how that starts to rebound. I will say this though, there have been all the conversation during the pandemic, well, people might just be scared to ride public transportation anymore. I can absolutely tell you that is completely untrue. We ran 4th of July service for the 4th of July celebration on the Star, and that train was completely sold out. So 750 folks riding the train in from Wilson County and eastern Davidson in for that event. And for the recent Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, we ran service and sold out about half the train, which is for a first-time event, it was pretty positive. So I won't say if we run it, they will come, but when they come back, they will ride it. So Janet, we're counting on you and the folks in your business to get folks back into those offices.
Try it, man. Try it.
Say a lot about that, but we won't. Steve, that was a great report. Anybody else have any questions or comments for Steve? Very comprehensive, took everything that I was going to say out of here, but I still got a couple more things. Mr. Bull, I just want to say that you were quoted 3 times today, so well done. Your leadership, what can I say? It's really good. Dan, congratulations on your promotion. I think that's great. You continue to do just great work, so thank you very much. Patrick Green, it's good to see you in the back of the room. I even recognize you with your mask on. I think it was the way your sunglasses sit on your head and the way your arms go. It's awesome to see you. And congratulations on the bargaining agreement. So that's great. So good work. Everybody, continue your good work. Know that we're here to support you in any way that you need us to support you. And just appreciative that everybody's out here working as hard as they can in these kind of times and uncertain times. And you don't know if you're going to have 10 people riding or no people riding. It just sort of depends on how our dear friend COVID decides to invade us on different times. So thank you all. Board members, y'all are awesome. Thank you very much for being here. And I think I have nothing further. If anybody else has anything for the greater good?
Move adjournment.
Move for adjournment. We are, it's moved, it's seconded, and we all agree. There you go. Thank you.
Margaret, what did you do?
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.org.